In round 4, we are going to increase the first stitch, and then we're going to add a regular stitch into each of the next 2 stitches. And we're going to repeat that all the way around. I am also still using my stitch marker to mark the first stitch of my round. The stitch marker helps me keep track of whatever row I'm on by telling me what the first stitch is of my round. So when I get all the way around the circle and I'm back at my stitch marker, I know that I just finished my round. If you don't have a stitch marker and you don't want to go out and buy them, you can use a bobby pin, a safety pin, a paper clip, or a contrasting yarn color. Those are all really good alternatives. The point is just to take off some of the counting load that you would have if you didn't have any kind of stitch marker at all. Now, to keep going about the flat circle tips, I just talked about the formula, meaning how many stitches you should increase every single round. And now we're going to talk about round 1, because the number of stitches you start with does impact how flat your circle is going to be. So the number of stitches that you start with in row 1 depends on a couple of things. The first one being the shape you're going for. If you want a pointy shape, you want a smaller number. If you want a flat top, then you want a larger number. Then it also depends what size yarn you're using. So if you're using a smaller yarn, you want to start with a bigger number. If you're using a bulkier yarn, you want to start with a smaller number. The minimum number that I think you should start with is 6. So you want to have at least 6 stitches in the middle. And the biggest number that I would recommend is 12. The only time I would use 6 is if I wanted kind of like a pointy hat, and the only time I would use 12 is if I'm making a super sized hat, meaning I'm going to need a lot of increases every single round in order to get my circle as big as it needs to be, because I personally don't prefer to go past 10 rows of increases, because after the 10th row it starts to get a little wavy, I guess. My personal preference is to start with 8 stitches, but I've also gone down to 7 or up to 9, but that is really kind of the ballpark that I stay with. But those are all my tips on that. In part 5, I'll go over some troubleshooting tips on what to do if your circle starts to be ruffled or wavy or starts to kind of cave in on itself. But if you like these kind of close-up stitch tutorials, be sure to like and follow. And if you have any questions about this stitch or another stitch or a project in general, you can leave them in the comments of any of my videos. I try to respond to them as much as I can.